everyone, and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. The continued heavy rains may have subsided for now, but for many Oklahomans, issues with their septic systems are continuing. For some guidance, here's Sunup's Curtis Hare and our Extension Septic Systems expert, Dr. Sergio Abit.
There's an old Oklahoma saying that says pray for rain and don't complain when it's muddy. But Sergio, there's a lot of issues that can happen when it comes to septic systems when there's flooding issues.
Yes, from flooding that can lead to water getting into the septic tank, or just plainly failure of your septic system altogether.
So let's kind of like walk through, from the last time we spoke, you were talking about there's two popular types of septic systems in the state, right. Aerobic and conventional. So let's start with conventional. What's some issues that can come with that?
Okay, so for conventional system, everything moves by gravity, doesn't run on electricity, but what you have there is that wastewater is actually disposed in the subsurface. So now if you have too much rain and you have flooding on top of the area where water is applied in the subsurface, that water could percolate into where we dispose of the water. And if there's too much water outside of the pipe, then water could actually go into the septic tank. And instead of water coming out of the septic tank, now water that goes into it kind of just go in it. So it backs up into the house. That's one.
So, in another system, the aerobic's becoming more popular, but flooding can just cause a completely different issue for that.
Yeah, the aerobic treatment units or systems, what it is that, you have a spray head, and everything, the wastewater that is partially treated is actually applied in the surface. And because it's pumped, it means that it runs on electricity. So if that area is flooded, number one is that you have a control panel outside that has electrical components in it. Electricity, water, they don't get along, so that means you have to turn off your system when the area is flooded. Secondly, if the area has, standing water on it, well, you cannot spray stuff on it because you're just going to be polluting the water. So that's another thing. So there's a lot of things that you need to be doing, but across these two systems, first thing is that if you have a basement, make sure that you check your basements, plug the drains in your basement, because if water actually tends to go into your house, they're going to flood the basement first. Second is that we have to minimize water use. We don't know how long the flood is going to last. So might as well be on the safe side and just minimize water use. And if there's flooding, specifically if you have aerobic treatment units, it would be prudent to turn the power off, particularly in the area of your house that feeds electricity to the aerobic treatment units.
Eventually it's going to dry out. Maybe, hopefully, it's going to start to dry out.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's Oklahoma. But what are some things after the flooding situation in people's backyards are gone? What are some things that they need to do going forward with that?
Okay, so the first thing is that, even if the water has already receded, and so you can see it standing on the surface, the owner still has to minimize water use in the next couple of days maybe. Why? Because the water might be out of the surface, but the subsurface may still be saturated. So the subsurface still cannot, accommodate additional water that needs to be treated. Second is that they have to go in there, just be careful, make sure that the power is turned off, and then inspect what they can see in there, whether there's some erosion problems, whether there's a sign that there's corrosion, for example, in the electrical panels. Observe those, because the next thing that they're going to do is to call a professional. And third, if water really went into the house, well, they need the service of a professional to clean that, because sewage is hazardous material and needs somebody who knows how to deal with it to clean up that material. So I have a fact sheet. The title is, septic systems, what to do after severe weather. So in there are a list of things that the homeowner has to really take note of, and suggestions of what to do to take care of your septic system during the flood and after the flood.
Alrighty, thanks, Sergio. Sergio Abit, Septic System Specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And if you'd like a link to the fact sheet he talked about, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, Wes Lee, and welcome to the weekly Mesonet Weather Report. This summer so far has been one of the most comfortable that I can remember as related to a minimum number of days with scorching hot temperatures. The statewide average high temperature this time of year should be around 93 degrees. The seasonal peak usually occurs around the 1st of August at about 95 degrees. As you can see from this chart, the statewide actual high temperatures shown by the black line has been well below the 15-year long-term Mesonet average shown by the blue fill for several weeks now. This data set has been smoothed to better show trends in the temperatures. While it has been a bonus to us that hate extremely hot weather, the cooler than normal temperatures may be putting stress on various warm season crops to stay on track. Degree days are one of our best ways to track how well a crop should be growing based on the temperatures. Each crop has a unique minimum and maximum temperature determined by scientists where the crop grows best. Based on these degree days, we can look up where a certain crop should be based on the actual growing conditions. Farmers can then make management decisions that are targeted at certain growth stages. For cotton, which has a minimum and a maximum degree day temperature of 60 and 100 degrees respectively, we can look at a table to estimate growth stage. For example, for cotton to bloom, it takes somewhere between 725 to 825 degree days. Here is the actual cotton degree day data for 3 locations, Altus, Shawnee, and Miami, over the past 5 years. You can easily see that as of July 6th of this year, we are behind the other years on the same date. This table assumes a May 1st planting date. Altus had 979 degree days this year. The previous 4 years were all above 1,000. Another way to look at it is this year we are only 87% of the 5-year average. On a longer planted crop, such as corn, we have accumulated more degree days. Scientists determined that degree days for corn accumulate between 50 and 86 degrees. Here once again we see that this year comes in with the lowest accumulation of degree days in the past 5 years. For corn planted on April 1st at Shawnee, it shows 1,679 degree days. This comes in at less than 93% of the 5-year average for this location. This cooler than normal air looks like it might continue for at least another week. According to the National Weather Service's forecast map, most of the state is shaded blue. This means that there is a higher probability of cooler temperatures than the long-term average. If things don't change soon, we might be worrying about frost damage this year on some slow-growing crops. Gary will be back next week with additional weather information on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Dr. Derrell Peel, our livestock marketing specialist, joins us now. Derrell, we're in the second half of the year, hard to believe. What's your take on the cattle markets so far?
You know, the first half of this year we had a lot of challenges, and we knew that was going to be the case. So we've been working through large numbers of feedlot cattle that have been bumping up against feedlot capacity. That's really limited the fed cattle market. We've seen dramatic increases in feed costs this year, grain prices, which is continuing, and of course we've got drought issues that are continuing to be an issue for the industry as well.
Can we expect, do you think, improvements in the second half of the year?
Well, I do think overall that we will see some improvements in the second half of the year. We're working through the large cattle numbers for one thing, so the feedlot situation and the fed cattle market situation should improve a little bit. Grain prices are going to stay high, so we'll continue to deal with that. But from a feeder cattle perspective, if we can get the fed cattle market a little support, that will also help support the feeder cattle market. So, the drought is an ongoing thing. We're looking to see whether or not that's having both short and longer term impacts, and it's really not clear quite yet, but we'll watch that going forward. One of the keys is that demand has been really good through all of this, and that's helped us a lot.
What are the most important things for cattle producers to watch for the second half of the year?
You bet. You know, we're going forward. The fed cattle market should improve. In fact, all of the cattle markets should improve in the second half of the year. So we're going to be watching for that. We haven't quite turned the corner yet, but I think we will here in just the next few weeks. You know, we're keeping an eye on these high grain prices. We're going to be watching forage production and hay supplies. We're obviously watching the drought condition for the impacts that could have, even if you're not in a drought area. And so, you know, going forward, you know, as we go forward, we'll be watching the demand, the trade situation, all of those factors that we normally keep an eye on, but they all are generally headed in the right direction.
Speaking of trade, you have some new data that has been released. What's your analysis of the import-export situation?
Yeah, that's another factor that's improving as we go through the year. We're getting, and we expected this, we've sort of predicted that we would see improving beef exports this year, and beef exports are up for the year to date. Beef imports are down after going up a little bit during the supply chain disruptions last year. So that's providing some net support to the demand side, and when you combine that with our strong domestic demand, you know, that's really helping support the wholesale and retail beef prices, and then that's going to help support cattle markets as we move into the last part of the year.
Okay, great information. Thanks a lot, Derrell. We'll see you next time.
So most Oklahomans are familiar with blackberry, and it's actually in the genus Rubus. And there's lots of different species of rubus across the United States. They're called blackberry, dewberry, and lots of other names, but they all look very similar. It's probably about the most perfect wildlife plant. It produces palatable foliage that deer and rabbits eat. It provides cover. Rabbit and deer and lots of ground nesting birds use it for cover, for nesting. And of course, everybody knows about the fruit, the soft mass that it produces that we all like to eat, and wildlife is no exception. Lots of wildlife use it. There are situations though where blackberry can become really dominant in a pasture, and you may want to set it back or not have it over such a large area of the field. There's several herbicides that are effective. Triclopyr is one that a lot of producers will use. You can also use metsulfuron or fluroxapyr or some combination of those. But the one thing I would caution you if you're going to control blackberry is just to think about your other objectives, because if you have wildlife objectives, you want to retain some of this plant. You probably don't want it over 50% of your pasture, but having some of it scattered about, at least on the edges of the pasture, will make a huge difference in how many deer, turkey, quail, and lots of other wildlife you have on that property. But even if only you're thinking about livestock do use blackberry to some extent. They'll use it for shade, but again, it can compete against grass, so it's always a balance. But just before you go through and spray the whole field, think about your overall objectives and also try to target those blackberry plants specifically, because the herbicides I mentioned will kill lots of other desirable plants in that pasture that you may also care about.
Wheat harvest is still going on across the state. Now, Kim, what are you hearing out there?
Well, the harvest is probably better than 90% complete. Some of the wheat that we're harvesting has been rained on, been wet for some time. I've heard some reports of sprout damage, but that's going to be a small percentage of our crop coming in. Overall, I think our yields were good and the quality is relatively good. The harvest up in Kansas is going full bore now, and they're bringing in some wheat.
Now, prices took a big hit this week. What's going on there?
Oh man, they got slaughtered on Tuesday after that 4th of July weekend. You look at wheat, go back to June the 30th, it's $6.35. On July the 2nd, before that weekend, $5.95. On the 7th, it was $5.60. That's down 75 cents for wheat. You look at forward contracts for corn. On the 1st, it was $5.75. On the 7th, it's $5.15. Corn took a 50-cent hit. And looking at soybeans, from $13.30 down to $12.50, that's an 80-cent hit. Now, what's causing that, I think, is yields. Yields are coming out relatively good for wheat. They're looking relatively good for the corn and the beans. Acres, there's some question about the USDA acreage report. I think the market believes there's more acres there than USDA said there was. And weather drives price. We've got drought up in North Dakota, up into Canada that impacts spring wheat, also impacts corn and beans. So we got a lot going on with the weather right now.
And what's going on with the world market right now?
Well, if you look around the world in the Black Sea area, they're starting their harvest. It's coming in relatively good. You've got Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan expected to produce 4.8 billion bushels compared to 4.6 last year. Plus you've got Romania sitting right there in this last week. They undersold Russia for export wheat. So you got Romania coming in the Black Sea areas with exports. You look at the European Union, 5.1 billion bushels this year, 4.6 last year. You look around the world, production's relatively high. Another record wheat crop. So we've got more than adequate supply of wheat, and I think that's part of the reason the prices have gone down.
And what about the funds?
Well, if you look at the funds, they've been getting out of the market. We've talked about that over the last couple times we've met. As they pull out, then that's taking money out of the market. They were mostly long, they're selling, and that's helping bring prices down.
So to producers who haven't yet sold their wheat, what advice do you got for them?
Oh, that's a hard decision. The price is still above the 10, 12-year average, so you still got a relatively good price. You look at what's going on around the world, the harvests are starting to come in, yields are looking well. However, we've only harvested around 40 or 45% of the world's crop. There's a lot of wheat to be harvested. Prices should or could go on up. I think I'd sell some wheat if I hadn't sold any, and maybe staggered in the market over the next few months.
All right, thank you, Kim. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Today, I thought I'd share a little bit of information about the creation of instant ramen noodles. It's believed that ramen noodles were introduced in Japan by Chinese immigrants in the late 19th or early 20th century. The dish consisted of hand-pulled wheat noodles, broth, and pork. By 1900, restaurants in Japan were offering versions of the dish. However, rather than being hand-pulled, these noodles were hand-cut. The invention of instant ramen noodles can be traced to one person, Momofuku Ando. After World War II, Japan was suffering from a food shortage. So to bridge the gap, the Ministry of Health encouraged people to eat bread made from wheat imported from the United States. It was this experience that motivated Momofuku Ando to begin experimenting to see if he could create a quick, easy way to prepare a meal of noodles. His method involved using a machine to make the noodles, which were then partially boiled and seasoned before being fried in oil to remove moisture, which helped to extend the shelf life of the finished product. The noodles were first marketed in Japan on August 25, 1958. However, it would take 12 years before instant noodles would make their way to the United States in 1970. And the first flavor introduced was chicken. So the next time you're enjoying a bowl of instant ramen noodles, remember Momofuku Ando. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or food.okstate.edu.
Good morning, Oklahoma. Thank you for joining us on Sunup. This week on Cow-Calf Corner, we're going to talk about the next part about managing for value and things we can do specifically in a cow-calf operation that could pay off for us in terms of marketing calves. And first ideas we start with are really more based on assessing what we're currently doing and seeing if that qualifies us to potentially verify our management practices to get into some sort of added value whenever we get ready to sell a set of weaned calves. We talked last week about preconditioning. Preconditioning pays off in added value, health, additional gain, less treatment, fewer chronics. The added value of dehorned and castrated calves is immense as compared to those that aren't and go into the marketplace. As we think about certain things we can do to manage for value, growth implants are something that usually cost about $2 per head to put in, and they're going to improve growth rate on a set of calves by 10 to 20%. Very cost effective to use growth implant technology if we're not already doing it, and it is something that can be implemented with those same preconditioning programs, potentially that first round of vaccinations that we talked about last week would be a good time to get that first growth implant into a set of calves. A lot of different products on the market. Other things we can do that are worth assessing our current management practices over are thinking about USDA process verified programs, or verifying our management practices on the farm or ranch to see if we qualify for certain programs that can add value. These basically fall under two different headings. When we think about the USDA verified programs, we have PVPs, or process verified programs, or QSAs, quality system assessments. Now, what does this entail? We can age and source verify calves if we are already keeping a calving book and we know when each calf is born, or at the very least when the oldest calf and youngest calf is born in a particular calf crop. We basically got the information we need. If we are willing to share that in a particular program with somebody that's going to verify and audit our program, we're going to have source and age verified calves. There's a number of different forms that PVPs can take if we are not hormonally treating or giving growth implants. We can classify under certain programs or get verified under certain programs if we never use antibiotics on a specific set of calves. That is another niche that we get into. There's a lot of these different things out there. Again, we're going to share a website on a fact sheet that producers can go to check into some of this. But the thing we encourage is take a look at what you're currently doing relative to some of these process verified programs. There may be some other things you could easily implement that qualify you to get into programs that give additional value to calves. These are not going to be without cost. There's going to be cost of ear tags. There's going to be cost of potential audits. Those costs are going to vary a little bit based on the program that you potentially get into. But as we think about a time of high input cost here in 2021, it's definitely worth taking a look at anything we can do to add value to that set of calves whenever we're going to market them. Thanks for joining us this week.
Finally today, we're looking at how those in the agritourism business have weathered the pandemic. Sunup's Ed Barron travels to a farm in Okmulgee County to learn more.
Hidden on the back roads of Mounds, Oklahoma, lies Endicott Farms.
Our farm is kind of a small specialty crop farm. We have pecan acreage, and then we have a couple acres of blueberries and blackberries. To get into the berries, we started out as an alternate crop to the pecan season, which is a fall season crop. We were looking for a way to bring people out to the farm and generate revenue, and so that kind of led us into blueberries and blackberries.
Agritourism is a growing industry in Oklahoma, and the Endicotts have taken full advantage of the opportunity.
It's a lot easier to have people come pick the berries than it is to pick them and market them yourself. And so I think from the very beginning we really had envisioned people coming to the farm to have the experience of coming out here, and that they can bring their families, their kids, grandparents can come out, spend time picking berries together.
Blueberries and blackberries both have a lot of attention right now. You know, just people, they're very popular, a trendy fruit almost. People eat them and seem to add them to everything. They have a lot of antioxidants, and so they're kind of a popular fruit right now, especially living so close to Tulsa where people didn't have to take a long trip to do it.
As of the 2017 census, there were over 800 farms here in Oklahoma that were involved in agritourism, generating about $6.5 million in revenue for those operations. So it's a great opportunity to educate people on agriculture and to generate revenue, not only for that farm, but for the local community as well.
You might think business suffered last year due to the pandemic, but the berry business ballooned like Violet Beauregard.
It was probably our best year last year.
Last year, looking at COVID, we really just looked at the guidelines that existed, you know, that were being put out, and how could we work within those to create a safe picking experience for our customers.
Like everybody, we were concerned as COVID was coming about, that what were we going to do with our picking season? Were we going to be able to pick, or what the situation would be? We streamlined our process so that we didn't have to handle any berries or handle any of the buckets or things that people were picking with. We just really kind of streamlined that process for the picker. It really was an outlet for people to get out of town and do something. So people were kind of looking for something to do, and they felt like coming out to the farm and the open air space was a good, safe environment to do that.
However, the recent weather hampered this year's berry crop.
In particular, the hard freeze on the blueberries, which was the February kind of extreme weather freeze. That one damaged the flower buds on many of our southern varieties, so we're still able to have a picking season this year, but definitely reduced from past years and what we would anticipate.
While the berry yields might not be as high, the Endicots will continue to grow their business.
Our goal in the future is just to continue to provide a high quality experience for our customers, making sure that we have a solid crop where people want to come out and pick, and have the environment where people feel like it's a pleasant place to come.
To come out and just enjoy the space and just take their time and pick berries and eat a few while they're doing it, it just is really good for the spirit in a way. I think people just really enjoy doing that.
In Okmulgee County, I'm Ed Barron.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and our social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.